Hey guys, welcome to the Launchpad, and thanks for joining me with the rest of the Rehab Rebels. If you don't already know, the Rehab Rebels are on a mission to launch out of the rat race, and we're committed to doing it together. If entrepreneurship, real estate, and passive income mean as much to you as they do to us, then you're in the right place. Sit back, buckle up, and prepare for launch. If you're enjoying our episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the Launchpad and like us on Spotify. Just tap one of the links below. By subscribing, you'll get new episodes delivered straight to your library every week. I'm here today with Jimmy Webb, and Jimmy has been one of North Oak Investments' most reliable clients for many, many years. Jimmy's done countless deals in the last 7 years since I've been around, and then prior to me coming to North Oak with Bernie, I don't know how many 10s, 20s, 30s of deals, lots and lots of deals with Bernie. Jimmy got his start in the real estate investment world after his career as a grocery store manager at a Thriftway Grocery chain. And so Jimmy got into the construction world, and he's coming today with a cautionary tale of what can happen in a bubble market. And so Jimmy had a front row seat to the 2008 financial crash and the real estate crash of 2008. And he got to see up front how that happened, the story leading up to it, how that bubble burst, and what we could do to avoid that in the future. Jimmy, I appreciate you joining us today. We're looking forward to unpacking the lessons learned from that time. We're getting almost 20 years away from it. We're 16 years, and some of our younger clients, they might not have experienced the 2008 crash. So, but before we get to that, we can kind of get into the beginning of your story and how you got into real estate. You said that you started working at the grocery store at the ripe age of 14 years old. Is that right?
That's correct.
So how does a 14-year-old get a job at the grocery store?
By accident, I think, but it wasn't meant for me going there to the grocery store. I'll never forget that story. It was on an Easter weekend, and I went with my dad to the store to shop, and he goes up to the manager at the customer service booth, and he's asking the manager if they needed any help because he was looking for a job for my older brother. And the manager says, yeah, I do need some help. We need help. And he says, well, I got to go home and get my son, or can I have an application? He says, well, what about that young man right there? And he says, oh, no, he's not old enough to work. He's not ready yet. And the manager looks over at me and he says, you want to work? I says, yeah. And he says, well, can he work? And my dad says, yeah, if you're going to take him, I guess, yeah. So I went out there and I started sacking groceries. They were busy, probably a little short on help for the Easter weekend. And that's when my grocery store career started, right there at 14. And I did that in the grocery store for 26 years on my first stint.
Now, did your folks have a background in real estate or mortgages or anything like that?
None. My dad was a Ford Motor Company assembly plant worker.
Okay.
He retired from that after 26 years. And my mom, she worked for Kansas City Life Insurance. She retired from that. I'm sure she probably did maybe 30 years in that. And so no business industry or anything like that in our family.
So you started out at a young age at the grocery store,
Yes.
And then that graduated up to eventually you becoming store manager. What was the cycle? How did you go from 14-year-old sacking groceries to managing the whole store?
That's a long story, but it started with me bagging groceries, making $2.60 an hour and getting tips from carrying out groceries. I'll never forget it. And it started with, the exciting thing about it was, I think the lesson learned back then was even working at that grocery store, the paychecks, my dad immediately took me and set up a bank account, and I learned how to save money, and I was just living off the tips. But just doing that, going through school was a great income. By the time I got to 16 years old, I had enough cash to buy me a car. It was rare that a lot of the young people in my neighborhood and my peers had the money to buy a car when they turned 16. And I stayed in that grocery store industry, You know, when I graduated from high school, I bought my first brand new car, and I had plenty of money because my parents were doing okay. So all my money just went into a bank account, and I lived off of just, you know, tips, and didn't need very much money to live off. So, but starting in that industry, it was sacking groceries, and then you go from sacking groceries to maybe a cashier. And after they promote you to a cashier, then usually they may go over to maybe stocking. You might even do a little bit of night stocking. Then you may go over to, then I went to departments, working in departments. They just kept moving you into different areas in that grocery store. And I can remember probably when I was a senior in or my high school, once I got up into high school, I was working in the produce department as a helper. And I think right around graduation or right prior to graduation, they were ready to put me into management. And I said, no, I got to go to school. I got to go to college. I still got some schooling to do. And I'll never forget that it was a real different experience for them because they allowed me to go to college. I went to accounting. It was called Kansas City Business College, where I was going for a accounting degree, and it was a 2-year program. But I was actually doing that in the day, and they were letting me come in at night and be a manager of a department at night, which was really kind of different. But they worked with me during that. And after I got done with Kansas City Business College, then I was running the department during the day, and you know, like they in a normal setting, like they like. And eventually, after I'd done that for a few years, they came to me and asked me, did I want to be an assistant store manager? And I said, yeah, that would be great. Okay. Yeah. So I did that for a few years.
I can't imagine the complexity of managing a whole grocery store. So when I was 16 years old, I got a job at Hy-Vee, and they put me to work right off the bat. I never worked the cash register, and they just put me right into the dairy. And so I worked there for 2 or 3 years. And I mean, running that dairy, it kept us on our toes. I mean, we'd be there till late at night, facing all the yogurt and the milk was constantly flying off the shelves. So you have to go in there and restock the milk, bring all the baskets outside, face everything, date everything. You have to go through and make sure the dates, the eggs, are the eggs cracked? And you have this whole department, and it was like, I mean, it was as much as the 3 of us back there could handle. And that's not even considering buying product and stocking everything in the store. But as a store manager, you're managing not just the dairy, but the meat and the produce and all the everything else I never even learned about. How do you manage that much complexity?
Well, I mean, it's more or less when you're in a store the size that I was working in, you touched everything. You went and helped. If the person didn't show up for work, you had to go over there and do it. And I mean, that was part of the learning process. You worked in almost every department in the store. The dairy, of course, we had a person that was in charge of the dairy, but if he didn't come, you had to do it. And the meat department, maybe you had to go back and help wrap some meat that day. That was what a manager did back then. I didn't start out in a superstore. You know, I got to the larger stores later in years, but my initial was a smaller store. I don't know, maybe 1,000 square foot store. But as I stayed in management, and it got to the 30,000 square foot stores, which were different, where you had the 3 people in a department doing that. Yep. But in my early days, that's where I learned, because a manager made sure, you know, things were done, and the people, if they didn't come to work, if somebody didn't, you had to go over there and do it, or cross-train somebody, have somebody else go that was cross-trained that can go do it. So it was interesting. It was a lot of work too.
Did they have formalized training to equip a manager to be able to handle all of that?
Not at that store level where I started at. I'm going to say the early years, there was probably maybe 20 employees in a store.
Okay.
So it was kind of on the job training. You know, you learned from Bob, who you were working beside. Bob, you went back there and worked with Bob. How to stock, how to rotate. I mean, all those things were just on-the-job training.
And eventually you ended up at Associated Grocers. Is that right? Doing some training there?
That was still in my later years, too, when I got to the bigger stores, the kind of the superstore. they would send you to Associated Grocers for training. They were getting a little more detailed then on how to run a department and calculate the profits and losses and what you should be doing. And then there was always systems that were changing, even order systems or how to order the product. They were evolving too, and they were changing. So we had to be able to keep up. So it was a constant trip for training at the AWG warehouse.
So they were contracting. Different chains were members of Associated Grocers. Is that right?
That's true too. Different chains, but for example, the Thriftways and the Price Choppers and a lot of them, they were members of Associated Wholesale Grocers.
Okay.
And they supplied them with their groceries and all their products. But there was different.
Okay, so that's the wholesale hub where the main product comes in and they distribute it to the stores.
That's correct.
And they would also train the management staff.
That's correct.
Okay, on systems and software and processes and all that.
The things of that nature, yes. Even if the cash register systems were evolving back in the day, they would help you with that. Train your people, maybe go down there. And then there was it was the owner's decision to figure out what systems they were going to use for cashiers and things like that. And there were other companies, DST, and maybe they would decide what cash register systems they're going to use, and they would come in and train too. So it was different.
You said even a small store had 20 employees. Mm-hmm. What did the superstore have?
Oh man, some of those was 60, 100 employees or better.
You had to have been hiring and firing constantly.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What did you learn about? I mean, I'm sure that you've hired countless people. What have you learned about a strategy to hire good people?
Well, you have to give people a chance. A lot of people it wasn't a lot of people coming with that experience to the grocery store. So you would try to feel for their personality, maybe check from their past job, do an application, they're going to, oh yeah, I want to work, I can do this. But we had to train them. Mm-hmm. We just had to train any new employees, and you had to get a feel for if you wanted to deal with this person. You kind of knew you can kind of feel if you wanted to hire the person or not. By the way they answered the questions. Of course, you had a form that you would ask the questions and how they answered them.
I can't imagine the amount of time. What kind of hours were you working in those days?
When I first got started, I was working for a company called Just Right Foods.
Okay.
When I was 14 years old. They went out of business, and the two managers that were working at the store bought the store, and they evolved it to Associate Wholesale Grocers, turned them into a Thriftway. Okay. And from them being the Thriftway store, they actually sold out eventually. I remember it was the President Reagan years, and they were not signing union contracts anymore. And these people decided that they were going to sell, and they sold to the Minor family.
Okay.
And that was I worked for the other people for, I believe, 7 years, and then the Minor family came in and bought that store.
Okay.
And I worked for them for 16 years. They owned 4 stores, and that's when I started to evolve to other stores and larger stores.
Uh-huh. Is there a Miners on Red Bridge? It's like 119th and Red Bridge over in that area.
There was one in the Brookside area. They had a store in the Brookside area. They had one in Lee Summit. And of course, the one that I worked at was on Stadium Drive, right by the ball stadium.
Okay.
And then later in my years, I went to the one on 31st and Prospect, which was one of their bigger stores.
All of those years, you spent how many? Over 20 years?
26 with total.
26 years in grocery.
Yeah.
What were some of the lessons that you learned there that you've taken with you throughout the rest of your life?
Oh man. As I got to the larger stores, I think that maybe what helped me in the real estate business was I learned that you didn't have to super manage everybody. Mm-hmm. Some things have to be supermanaged, some don't. Mm-hmm. And I just remember some of those people would come to work and they do their job and they do it fine, and you wouldn't have to say nothing to them. But there was some you had to go visit. And I saw that kind of in relation to in the real estate business. Mm-hmm. There was houses that cruise and different people. You can just give them an assignment, and which made it easier to manage because I knew how to manage people. It helped me be able to manage the real estate business.
So how did you get into the real estate business? It doesn't sound like, I don't hear real estate as a part of that story for 26 years. How do you go from that to doing all of the numerous deals that you were doing in real estate?
Oh, that was interesting. I had a home that I bought. I bought my first home, and I had a buddy who was a carpenter, and we grew up together. I just knew him from growing up. We were probably in first, second, third grade, went all through high school together. And whenever I needed some carpentry work done on my house, or if I needed a fence, I'd call him. So I wanted to do some work in my basement, remodel it, and I called him, and he was working. And he said to me, the whole time he was there in my basement, he says, "Man, if you got money, you shouldn't be putting money in this basement." He says, "You should give me that money, and let's go buy a house and fix it up and sell it." And I'm like, "I'm not giving you my money." I wouldn't give this guy. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not going to give this guy my money. But and he was doing it in the evenings, and every evening he came over, and that would always come up. "Man, stop putting this money in this basement. You should give me this money." But the thing that it was, he was out there in that field, in the real estate field, and he was a carpenter, and he was watching these guys buy these homes and fix them up and sell them, and he saw the monies that these guys were making. And all of a sudden, one day, we're riding down the street. He wasn't the type of guy that I hung out with, per se, on a regular basis. But I don't know why we were in the car together this day, and we're riding down, maybe going to get some material or something, I don't know. But he starts hollering, "Pull over, pull over." And I'm like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And anyway, I get over and I pull over, and he says, "Come on." And it's an older gentleman standing on the corner, and it was a younger guy standing on the corner. And we get out of the car, and we get out, and of course, they're slapping hands, greeting each other, and all this. And I guess he introduces me, maybe, I don't know, but I'm standing there on the side to just kind of listen to these guys talk. And all of a sudden, the older gentleman was talking, and he was telling us how he had this young man here, and he was mentoring him on how to buy real estate and fix it up and sell it.
Now, was this Bernie?
No, this was not Bernie. This was a guy named J.K.
Okay.
And he had done he was big in construction around the city. James Kelly was his name.
Okay.
And they were sitting there talking, and he's telling Mike and myself how he was helping this young man. This young man had been in trouble. I think he'd done some jail time, maybe with some drugs or something, and he was showing him a different way of making money legally.
Yeah.
And the young man was standing there, and he's talking about, "Yeah, I just did my first one, and I made $25,000. Okay, now all of a sudden I'm hearing this. He's got my attention, and he's elbowing me. "This is what I've been telling you. This is what I've been telling you." So, and at that point, I'm kind of expressing, okay, maybe I'm interested at this point. And James, my buddy, he's real excited. And J.K., the older man, he says, "Here, call this guy right here. He'll help you get some money." That was Bernie. So he's handing us Bernie's card. And we go back to my house, and we're in the basement, and he's at it again, and I'm listening to him now. He's finally got my attention. I'm listening to him. So we decided, well, we're going to call Bernie, see if we can get this money, get us going. Huh. Okay, well, I think he goes to Bernie, do an application. I think Bernie denied him. I can't imagine Bernie denying people today, but back then he denied him. And then I put in my application, they denied me. Well, I think he might have his credit score and things probably wasn't. And then you've been in the grocery business all your life. You don't know nothing about it. So, "Yeah, we're not going to give you no money either." So at some point, we came up with this idea. I think it became a challenge to us at that point. So what's going on? So we.
Yeah, someone tells you can't.
There you go.
You're going to figure out how you can.
So we were challenged then, and we came up with the idea that we were going to form a company.
Okay.
And go back and present our application.
You and your carpenter buddy.
Yes. Yes.
Were you guys still working on your basement at that
Yes,
point?
yes,
So
we
you're
were.
working there, and now you're forming a company together to go.
Yes.
That had to have been an exciting time.
It was. It grew to be for me, but
Yeah.
initially, I'm still kind of roughing through it. But we came up with that idea that we were going to form a company, and we did that, and we took it back to Bernie, and he says, "Okay, I think we're going to let you guys do a deal."
There you go.
And he about went nuts. He's like, "You getting? I can't give you the lingo he was using, but you getting ready to be rich," is what he told me. I said, "Okay, let's go ahead and get to it then." And I remember we did our first deal, 2707 East 27th Street. We got a loan from Bernie, and before that, I had to kind of convince my wife too, because we were using her credit, so that took me a little bit of convincing. Hey, look here, this is what I'm gonna do.
Yep.
But she got on board, and we got the applications submitted, and we got approved and all that. And we did our first house, 2707 East 27th Street, and I'll never forget it. That was when our agreement was, I'll take care of everything. You manage the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I says, okay, that's fine. I'll go with that, because we were working pretty much on my grant. So I had to protect the money. So,
and you knew a thing or two about accounting.
Yes.
And you've been managing a lot of complexity. So that was probably no big deal for you.
No big deal. And so I was pretty much handling the books, and he was doing the construction during the day. And I'm still at the grocery store at this time.
Wow.
And the first deal we did, and what we did was we did what they call a burr today. We bought it, rehabbed it, rented it, and refinanced it.
Uh-huh.
And I think on the refi, back in those days, you could get a little cash out, and I think we probably took $10,000 cash out on the back of that deal, split that $5,000 for him, $5,000 for me, and then we put it on Section 8, and we had probably a $200 a month cash flow, positive cash flow, which was good.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I wasn't used to really getting $5,000 like that on a regular basis. A tax refund, I might have gotten $1,000 or something, and I was pretty excited once a year.
Yeah.
But here I've gotten $5,000. So we go back. Okay, let's do another one. Our second deal, 5101 Euclid.
Isn't it funny how you remember those addresses even years in the future?
Yes, yes. So we did the second one, pretty much the same scenario.
Uh-huh.
And we were excited, and we did maybe 4 or 5 of them. He was the type of guy, and not only him, but we started telling people what we were doing, and people were like, "Wow," and they liked what we were doing, and we was telling them we got rental properties now and this, and they wanted to know how could they get involved in this. So at some point we went to Bernie, and we says, "Hey, we've got people that's got jobs and good credit. Can we buy houses for them and fix them up and rent them for them?" And he says, "Well, submit their applications."
Yep.
And they start approving them. And all of a sudden now we've got clients, investors we were buying houses for, and they were loving it. The same scenario, and after a while, man, we had probably 10, 15 clients we were buying for. And I think at that point, and I was learning I have to let you know, I didn't have a clue on how to rehab a house or how to fix up a house. But from doing the books at night when I got off work, because I was keeping track of Lowe's, Home Depot, wherever we were getting material, and what was being bought and what was going on, and we were communicating. That's how I learned the process of how to rehab a house.
Yep.
And at some point we were traveling, and now I kind of know I think I got an idea of how to do this. And he's got money now. His bills are better. He's in a better position, and credit score is probably a little bit better. And I'm in and for some reason I think we decided that had some different ideas, and we decided to dissolve, or we didn't dissolve, but we stopped working in JR and JW.
Sure.
And I started my company. He started a new company, and we had all those investors, and we divided them up.
Okay.
And at that point, I was at the grocery store, and I think I went to Bernie. I'll never forget. I went to Bernie, and I told him, I says, "Man, I'm ready to quit this grocery store because I've got some obligations out here. And when do you think I should? He says, when you start making more money than what you're making in the grocery store, and you got to have health insurance. I said, well, my wife, I could get health. My wife can cover that. And I was definitely making more money than what I was making at the grocery store already. And we had been doing this maybe a year or two, maybe.
Okay.
And at that point was when I left the grocery store, and I had to take care of these clients that were chomping at the bits because they maybe had done one or two for them, and they wanted more of these properties.
Was that a tough decision to make, to leave the safety and the security of? I mean, that's all you had known for 26 years. Was that an easy decision for you to make?
No, Tommy, I was excited to leave the grocery
You
store.
were?
Yes, I'd been in the grocery store from age 14. I had applied for other jobs, but for some reason, I didn't get nobody would hire me, or for some reason, I just never got another job. Maybe because they worked me a lot, and I didn't go out there and explore hard enough or whatever, but I stayed in that grocery store for a lot of years, and it wasn't bad money, and it wasn't a bad job. So I stayed there and I worked, but I was always really kind of wanting to try something different. So here was my opportunity.
And you took the smart approach of getting your side gig rolling before you jumped ship.
Yes.
You already had this work, and you're already making more than you were making at the grocery store. Then it wasn't quite as risky as if you just pulled the plug on day one.
No, I was making probably double what I was making at the grocery store, just on the side gig.
Yeah.
So that was a no-brainer. We can go. Maybe Bernie didn't realize what my bank balance was at the time, but it was okay.
If you're enjoying our episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the Launchpad and like us on Spotify. Just tap one of the links below. By subscribing, you'll get new episodes delivered straight to your library every week. So how did the routine go? So you help somebody find a house.
Mm-hmm.
You bring them in to Bernie. Bernie makes them the construction loan. Is that right?
Well, a little bit different than that. Actually, we would have different realtors that would bring us deals.
Okay.
And of maybe a foreclosed house or a distressed house or whatever it might have been at the time. And we had a pocket of clients, and we'd say, okay, we want that one. Let's put that one in Gerald Williams' name. And we sent it to Gerald. That's a good deal. And Gerald, and they would buy it. And the realtors kept bringing them, and we said, well, we're going to put that in Susan's name. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's Susan's house. And we were just allocating these houses that the realtors were bringing us on the clients that we wanted to give them to.
Okay, so the client comes, they have the deal in hand,
mm-hmm.
but who gets the loan?
They get it's in the client's name,
and they get the loan from Bernie. So you bring them down to Bernie.
Yes.
And now you guys have a loan, and then you manage the construction.
Yes.
Okay, so then you're managing the construction. You get the property finished. Then what happens?
We would actually put a tenant in there for them, and most of the tenants, not all, but most of the tenants were Section 8 tenants, which they made them more comfortable because they got a check every month. It was a guaranteed rent check.
So you rent it, and then what? They own it. You don't own the house. Mm-hmm. They own it. They have a renter in it. And then what do you do?
Well, it was their decision of whether they wanted myself or a partner to manage it, which we had kind of separated at that point. But when I had my clients, it was either you can go get your own management or you could hire me to manage it.
Okay, so then you take on the management
as well.
Okay, and then on some of these, you said that would they sell the house? Would they refinance it? How did they get out of Bernie's loan?
That was a refi.
Okay.
That they were to refi it, and kind of those subprime loans were back then.
Yeah.
And subprime mortgages, that a lot of those were going on back then, so it was pretty easy for them to refi out of it.
So pretty much they could all get refinanced out. As soon as you put a renter in there,
yes.
You knew it was going to be refinanced.
Yes.
It didn't even matter who they were, what their income was. You weren't even worried about it.
Right, that's correct.
Wow. So you're rocking and rolling then.
We're rocking and rolling.
How many of these deals did you do?
On an average, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 a month. We were bringing Bernie.
Man, and your friend, you're getting them. You're doing the Burr method for your buddies. Mm-hmm. You're getting the construction fee, the management fee.
Yes.
would you do cash out refis?
Yes.
And so on the cash out, would you take some of the profit for the equity that you made?
Okay. When we found a deal for him, every deal was different. No deal was the same. So we would sit down with this client and we would tell him this is probably what's going to happen, and this is how the money's going to be divided, and you could probably get some money out and you might give us a and even in the construction phase, we may not have to use all the construction monies. And we either left some in or we divided. It was kind of a decision we would come together.
Well, and you're the one bringing them to the table. They don't know anything about doing any of this stuff, and you're putting them with a rented property that they own with a tenant in it.
They were excited.
With 30-year mortgage on it.
They were excited.
Yeah.
And Tommy, I tell you, it was my insurance man. It was my neighbor. It was everybody that that knew what we were doing. Wanted to be a part of that. So
how many years did that go on?
Oh man.
What year did that start? Like when did you quit the grocery?
I quit the grocery, I think, in 2001. And I think initially of meeting Bernie was in 99 or 2000. And I think when we started picking up the investors was probably 02, 03.
Okay.
And that went on, up until 08, until things started changing a little bit in the marketplace.
And were you keeping some of these for yourself too? Would you run the Burr method for yourself and not give them all to your buddies?
Oh, absolutely.
So on some of them, you'd bring the deal, you'd put your name on it, get the loan from Bernie, repair it, refinance, put a renter in it, and then just do it again.
Yes.
And so you're doing that, and you're doing it for everybody else.
That's right.
And that's just rocking and rolling. And you were bringing those to Pat Grace, weren't you?
That's right.
He was on. He was in here just a few weeks ago.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's kind of like his story kind of merges with yours. So he was another piece of that. He was one of the guys that's writing those in loans, and then he's selling them to Wall Street, right?
I believe so.
Which is what everyone in the whole country was doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
But yeah, Pat was instrumental in helping us a lot to keep that moving. He I don't know how he was doing it, but he was getting those loans. He was getting them done.
Last time we talked, you said that for the properties that you were buying and holding, you had some must-do things. So that some people would just put a lipstick finish on, but you always had this bullet list. What are those things that you would always do?
A lot of the other people that were in the industry, they used to tease me a lot, and I'm gonna date myself a little bit. They'd tell me, because I would spend a little bit more money of that rehab monies. I was going to make sure I had a roof. I made sure I had new windows. I was going to make sure we had a new HVAC, a new furnace, all that stuff.
Yep.
And just because I knew that would, in the management process, that was going to make my life easier. And they used to tell me, man, you need to quit putting them plasma TVs in the houses. And I'm like, no, this is just stuff that you really should be doing. But it was. I think it was the right thing to do, for not only for myself, but for my client, because I knew it was going to make life easier for everybody.
What are some of the non-negotiables for someone who wants to build a real estate portfolio for themselves? What do you have to put on a remodeled house? Roof, the
value items. Like I just mentioned, the roof, that's going to keep the value there. The windows are going to keep the value there. The HVAC, the hot water heaters, and all that, things like that.
And then that's going to keep your maintenance calls down on your tenant.
Yes. I was managing these homes myself, all these homes that I had. I mean, I didn't have a property management company, and it wasn't that difficult for me. I didn't feel myself in a strain or pinch. I had one full-time maintenance guy. I put him in a house, and he didn't have to pay me rent, and I paid him a weekly salary. I didn't want that guy to get away, so I kept him real close to me. And he would work, 5, maybe 6 days a week if I needed him on a 6th day. But he was a full-time worker, and he wasn't too stressed out. If there was a problem with any of these houses, and we were buying older homes, I think if most of the problems that I may have had in these homes may have been plumbing problems, maybe, and maybe from the house, maybe from the tenant, but things like that. I mean,
somebody flush a box of Kleenex down the toilet.
You understand. The kid threw the toilet in there, But the management wasn't that tough. And I I would collect my own rents. Some of them were on Section 8, but not all were on Section 8. And I'd actually go by and pick up my rents. And that was one of my criterias with when I was renting to clients. I wouldn't rent to anybody unless I went to their home first. It may seem strange, but I give you an application and you fill it out. I tell them I'm going to fill the application out and call me, let me come pick it up. And $25 application fee or whatever that may have been. But and I would go, and I always knew after I did that, I'd almost already made a decision whether or not I wanted to rent to them, because I knew what I saw at that house was probably what I was going to see at my house.
I've never heard another real estate investor, maybe other people do that, but you're the first person that I've heard say that. I think that's such a smart idea. You're getting a preview of what your property is about to look like.
That's correct.
It's a genius idea to, on every one, before you even sign that lease with them, scope them out.
Right. And I told them, and I says, I'm coming. You tell me when to come. I'm not telling you I'm coming on Friday at 12 o'clock. You tell me when to come. Uh-huh. So, if they needed to clean it up or if they needed to do this, that, and the other, it wasn't any pressure. But if I went there and it still wasn't clean, either you didn't care about me enough to even clean it up, or you can't clean it up. But if they could clean it up before I got there, okay, that's all I'm saying. If you move out, I want to be able to clean it up as well.
Yeah.
And then after that, after I picked up the application, then it was the income and the other things that I checked, CaseNet, talked to the previous landlords, and things like that. But for the most part, I'd say 50% of the decision was made when I made that visit.
Going back to the repairs, you said roof, windows, gutters, HVAC, the hot water tank. What about a hot water tank? You buy a house, the hot water tank it's old and rusty and decrepit, but it's working. Do you replace that? You got the furnace is working, but it looks like it's on its last leg, but it works. Do you replace that and just not have any headaches, or do you roll the dice and wait to replace it later?
Most of them I was replacing, Tommy.
Even if they're working?
Even if they're working. And I tell you the simple reason why. Back then, you have to understand, we were rolling volume. I was doing quite a few. So the numbers that I could buy this stuff for, and this contractor that I had doing my HVAC, the numbers were so good with him, it didn't make sense not to do it.
Yeah. And now you're just solving all of those headaches. Because even if you could save a couple $1,000s right now, if you have to do it in the middle of the night 6 months from now, you're better off just doing it. You don't have to worry about that.
I think that, too, I have to keep in mind that I was thinking, as I acquired these properties, one day I'm going to sell them. I don't want to have these houses forever. And this is going to help me to unload some of these houses, or sell them, I should say. So I was kind of preparing for that too.
While all this is rolling and life is good, and I mean you're rocking and rolling, and a lot of people were doing that back at that time. I'm talking with Pat Grace a few weeks ago. He experienced the same thing. I mean, it sounds, for someone like me that was too young back in those days to have even known about it, I feel like I missed out on the sweetest spot of real estate. But lurking under the surface were these adjustable rate mortgages. Tell us about the adjustable rate mortgage. How does that work?
Most of them would balloon in 5 years.
And what does that mean?
That means the interest rate would go up.
Okay.
You'd probably start out maybe in a 5-6% rate, and then in 5 years it could go to a 9, 10. I don't know. All of them were kind of different. But
so
it was an adjustable rate. It was an adjustable rate mortgage is what these were.
So you might be cash flowing $100, couple $100 for the first 5 years.
Correct.
What happens to that cash flow on year 6?
Actually, you probably want to have enough cash flow to be able to refi it or sell it.
Okay.
Or refi it again and keep it going if you like the property. If the property's performing enough, you might want to, you know what I mean? But you got to have, the credit and the criteria to do it a little different.
And the credit and the criteria was easy to come by back then.
I had it.
So these adjustable rate mortgages, people are doing them. You might even realize there was a little bit of risk baked in.
They were fast and easy.
But yeah, it's easy to get, and it's easy to get out of them too, because you could always just refinance out. You can
Right.
sell, the
Right.
credit's flowing.
Right.
You're not worried about the adjustable rate mortgage.
Right.
And so that gets us into the loose underwriting. So what did it take for a person to get a mortgage back then?
I think fog of mirror. But it wasn't that tough. I saw people with 400 credit scores get mortgages back then.
You 400 credit scores,
Yeah,
like
I
you
know.
don't pay anyone.
Tommy, I'm just telling you,
Oh
man.
my God. So that's just like, they don't even check credit, basically.
Yeah.
What about I've heard stated income, no doc loans.
So
What's a no doc loan?
I think you just tell them how much I think most of that may have been for the investors on the no doc loan and stated income. They could probably get the refi. But I think maybe and I'm not a finance guy, but I think maybe on the homeowner side, for the residential selling to an individual, they had to produce income, and I think they were accepting lower credit scores for them.
Okay.
Okay.
So they did. So a homeowner had a little bit more criteria
Yes.
to meet.
Yes.
But for these investors, and investors were gobbling properties up.
Yes.
You always knew that if you needed to get out of your 5-year arm, get rid of your rental property, you could always sell it to some investor, right?
Right.
Well, then, and you're telling me that they just asked, how much money do you make? And a person said, I make $5 million a year.
Well, they may have asked for a bank statement.
Okay.
Yeah, you had to give them a bank statement. Maybe occasionally, I think each lenders had different criteria too. But some of them, I can remember maybe on occasion, maybe giving them a tax return and a bank statement, and 680, between 640, maybe 680 credit score, that what was required back then to do that.
But the no doc loan, it was a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's getting away with not doing any docs. I mean, so it's like some people back then on the stated income and the no doc loans. I mean, just based on the name, it sounds like that means that you could tell the bank, I make this, and they say, okay, great, write that on this form here, and they don't have to verify it. Did that ever happen?
I never done any of those. I don't.
But did other people have access to
I heard
those?
of that happening.
And so it's those people were able to buy these houses, right?
Yes. Or refi them. They probably had already bought them, but maybe on a refi they probably did that. I don't recall ever hearing anybody just going and initial purchase of a home with
But on a
no doc.
refinance.
But a refinance maybe.
Okay. And that loose underwriting was creating this demand that just couldn't be satisfied
That's true.
because everyone wanted more.
Right.
And the bank would keep lending because they could say whatever their income was, and the bank would just let them do it. Am I getting the story right?
I think so. The country was in a mode of promoting the American dream, home ownership, and I don't think everybody should own a home. And I think they were forcing the issue and just lowering the criterias and letting the money flow.
And they're selling it to Wall Street.
Yes.
And Wall Street is hungry for the returns, and it's backed by a mortgage, and they think it's safe. It ain't going anywhere.
Right.
And so down on the front lines, they're just doing as much of it as they can, packaging it, selling it to Wall Street.
Yes.
And the balloon is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes.
And so when did it pop? What do you remember what was going on in the world when the 08 meltdown started?
Yeah, what was it? 07, 08 was when all of a sudden, I mean, these high risk loans, a lot of people stopped making some mortgage payments. And I think they started realizing that, and maybe those accelerated interest rates were starting, and they couldn't afford to make the payment anymore. And I think they were selling maybe a hope or a dream that when they put these people in these high risk mortgages, that the property was going to appreciate, their income was going to go up, and their credit was going to be better in 5 years, and they can refi, and now they've got the real good American dream. They've got but some of that didn't. I think a lot of that was not happening.
Yeah.
They were just putting people in homes that maybe shouldn't.
Have you seen The Big Short?
No, I don't believe so.
It's a good one, and it tells the tale from the perspective of the guys on Wall Street.
Okay.
And I can't remember the guy's name, but he saw it coming. And he saw weakness in some of these banks that were buying these mortgage-backed securities. And he realized that he actually went and started inspecting some of these homes and knocking on doors. He would get the addresses that were inside of this packaged security.
Okay.
He would fly out to wherever it was in Louisiana, and he'd start walking up and down the suburbs looking and knocking on doors and talking with people. And they said, oh, yeah, we haven't paid the rent. And my buddy over here said that they're going to, well, I don't even need to pay the mortgage because it's just, you could go X amount of months before paying the mortgage and then someone's going to refinance it out. And he was getting all these wacky stories from people. And he called it because he actually went out and he inspected it. And he took a big short position on basically on the whole U.S. economy. And he was right. He made, I don't know how much, a ton of money. But from his perspective, he's seeing the end results. And it was a few of these financial institutions that were buying these packages of all of this stuff. That it's the no-doc loans, it's the stated income loans, it's these people that didn't belong in these 5-year ARMs.
Right.
And there was too much of it.
Risky.
The demand went down. And as soon as the demand went down, there's no one there. It's like the game of what's the game when you're the cakewalk, and the music stops, or you're walking around the chairs. What's the
musical chairs?
Musical chairs. Yeah, I mean that's the music stops and someone took the buyer.
Right.
There's no buyer there.
Right.
To buy the house.
Right.
And then who was it first? Lehman Brothers, and then it was and then the next one fell, and the next one, and the whole thing just comes tumbling down.
Right.
What was it like, boots on the ground, when all of that happened?
Man, the real estate market all the banks started to stop lending. I mean, the real estate industry seemed to seize up a little bit. And the people, I couldn't do any more refis. People weren't able to buy. I mean, the banks just kind of seized up. And then the mortgage companies start going out of, they started after people stopped making all these payments, and they realized how bad this paper was they put out there, and people couldn't make these mortgage payments. The mortgage companies start going out of business. And man.
And so what was it like to have a house on the market back then?
I don't think.
If you people putting a house on the market, it just sits and sits and sits, and there's just no buyers buying.
Right. There was no money.
And then values start coming down.
And
the house is still sitting, and the value's going down,
right.
and it's going down, and no one's buying still, and they're just going down.
Right. And they've got loans on them at this value.
And they can't pay it.
Right.
And then the banks start foreclosing, and then it's just another foreclosure sitting on the street, and no one's going to buy it.
Right.
And then the whole thing plays out.
They couldn't sell it.
I was a young adult back then. I think I was in my early 20s, and I remember that. It was bleak, It's like you look around the streets and the businesses, and everything was kind of like businesses looked like they hadn't been modified lately, and shopping centers parking lots all screwed up. And but in the years since that, if you drive through some of those neighborhoods that had a bunch of foreclosures sitting around, they've all been cleaned up.
Yes.
I mean, it's like they've all been picked through, and all of the turds have all been polished, and every nice, happy family living in the house.
Well, I think a different investor came onto the market after that, who started buying up a lot of these foreclosed properties. There were still investors out there, so it was just a different kind of investor. And I think the underwriting started changing, and things changed. It took a couple of 2 or 3 years for things to kind of shuffle back out and level out to where real estate started flowing again.
The thing that stinks is the people that had to sell in that market. In 2007, the average home price, this data is from the Heartland MLS.
Okay.
The average home price was it hit 183,000 at some point in 2007. That was the highest it had been.
Okay.
183. Then by 08, it drops down into the toilet. And in some neighborhoods it was worse than others. But by mid 2013, they had rebounded back up to the 183. So from 2007, about 5.5 years later, we're back to where we were. And if people could have just been able to pay the rent for those 5 years and just hang on to those properties, you wait 5 years, and that even in the worst trough that we've had in recent history, 5 years later, you're back on top as an investor, as an owner.
Mm-hmm.
But the tough thing is that for those people that sold at the bottom of the trough, those people have to take the hit.
Right.
And it's a shame. It seems like that, it's too bad that those people couldn't have pivoted into some other way to hold on to those properties, because then here comes the values back up. But when you have too many buyers in the market and too many lenders lending on loans that they shouldn't be doing, something like that had to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, some of those mortgage companies were bailing out. If they'd maybe had the insight to maybe try and work through some of those bad mortgages they had, maybe call these people, and try to adjust the rates and work with them to get them through that period, might have been helpful too.
Yeah, and then by 2013, 5.5 years after the height, we're back up to the height again. By 2015, we go from, now the average house is $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
So just wait, that's like 6.5 years. Or seven, maybe I've got these numbers wrong. Maybe 7 years or so, 7, 8 years. Now you're dollars ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just goes up.
Right. Well, all areas didn't go back up too quick. Some of them kind of hung down there for a while. But there was probably in the suburbs and some of the other. They took some hits, but they eventually came back up.
Yeah.
But not everybody.
So, given the mess of the lending situation
Mm-hmm.
that was created by Wall Street, by banks that were running crazy policies because the Wall Street guys would buy it.
Yes, that's a problem. That was a problem.
So they come in and they go and they clean things up. There was the Dodd-Frank Act took place in 2010. So I mean, the whole government's sitting around the round table trying to figure out how do we avoid this.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen things get cleaned up in the lending space since those days?
Oh, I think the underwriting is totally different today than it was back then.
How so? How?
Well, I mean, you've probably almost got to put 20% down to buy a property back then. I don't know if anybody could go buy a property and not at least put 20% down.
And they were given up to 100% financing back then?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And stated income and no
All
docs
that.
and no credit.
I mean,
and 100%. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get much of that today.
Wow.
If any.
I helped Matt Bartle, who's one of the owners in North Oak, and he owns a lot of properties and has a great financial statement. I helped him get some financing on some properties a couple of years ago.
Okay.
It was a nightmare getting a couple of loans for properties that he owned free and clear.
Wow.
It was a nightmare. I mean, tax returns and all of this documentation. It took months to feed the bank all of the documentation they need. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who they could just close their eyes on and give him whatever he wants and they'd be fine.
Right.
It's like a completely different world, it sounds like, than this just free-for-all that
Right.
was going on back then.
Yeah, a lot of people keep saying, well, we'll have another 2008 and, that kind of recession of the real estate. I don't see that.
Why not?
Because just the lending criteria are so much different now today. People are smarter back then. I don't know why they were so asleep at the wheel back then, but what they were promoting was not a good idea. But
Yeah.
it's just they just don't have the same criteria today. People. I think lenders and everybody's have learned their lesson.
I know that part of the Dodd-Frank Act requires lenders who are selling to the secondary market
Mm-hmm.
to take on some of the liability if those loans go bad.
Okay.
They're on the hook for some of it. So now they can't just sell it to Wall Street in a package of crap that they're selling off.
Yeah.
If that package of crap starts going bad, that bank's on the hook still. That wasn't the case back then. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's going to sober everybody up.
Right. Well, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they were guaranteeing those weak paper that they had. They were buying it from them. I think the lenders, mortgage companies knew that they could sell them to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae because they were guaranteeing those loans for them.
Yeah.
So that's why they kept doing it. That's why they just kept doing what they were doing.
What do you see in the current market? Lending has tightened. Underwriting standards have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
It's slowed down. It's a more right-minded approach for lenders. They're verifying income and bank statements and tax returns and all of these things. But it's also put the brakes on the real estate activity. And it's kind of turned into, we do have a slow market right now. How has that affected the market that you're doing business in?
I think maybe it's slowed down right now. Maybe it's because it's an election year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think both the candidates are promoting, $25,000 tax credits for first-time home buyers and different things like that. And maybe people are waiting around to see what happens right now. But I think maybe that may be some of the reason. And I think there's still a lot of, I'm a realtor as well. I got a real estate license in 2005 because I wanted to be able to go out and find my own property. So I'm out there in the real estate selling, buying and selling, and there's still buyers out there. But I think the buyers are different. They're smarter buyers out there now.
Mm-hmm.
I think you got to have the right kind of product out there for them to buy.
You think they're waiting for rates to come down some?
I think that's always an expectation, but they're still out there buying. They're just buying a better product because they know that they can always refi.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll buy today, but with the idea that they're going to refi because the rates are going to go up, they're going to go down, and people know that.
Have you been able to hit your prices on recent sales?
I've over. I'm going over.
You're going over what you expected
yes,
to.
on the appraised value. I'm getting appraisals up front, and I'm usually getting over the appraised value.
But you're not putting the lipstick finish on the house. You're doing it upright. I've seen your properties. You're doing them upright. But when you do it right, you're saying you're hitting your value and then some.
Oh, yes.
And how quickly? Do you have to wait longer than normal?
Within 30 days.
Okay.
Or sometimes not that long, but most within 30 days.
So what's the biggest challenge for you and your business currently with today's market? What's the hardest thing?
As buying rehabs now, just the wholesalers are a challenge for me because we're not able to, the values have changed. The wholesalers, we used to could go out there in the day and find a foreclosed property. Foreclosed properties are really kind of rare because with all the technology, before a house can get to a foreclosed, the wholesalers have already met them there at the door, have worked out a deal to sell me your house or take it over. And that's kind of gone. But so in the past, I could go out and find a property like that. But when you buy from the wholesalers, the prices have inflated a little bit, and it's a different market now. So
the wholesalers
finding the properties are a little more difficult, and you're probably going to do a better rehab, better product, better deal if you bought a house from somebody you knew or a referral. Hey, Sharon over here, we know she's wanting to sell her house. You can probably, before the other people get to her.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they'll turn around and they'll buy it from Sharon or whoever and inflate the price, and that rehab number that used to be there that they may say, it only takes $25,000 to fix this up. Buy it, but to me, it's taken more than 25. I mean, when I look at it, it's just not realistic.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful of those deals, and that's what I see a lot of deals out there today.
What's your go-to approach? Are you buying most of your properties from wholesalers, or are you knocking doors? Are you just networking with people?
Networking with people. I don't think I've ever bought a wholesale deal yet.
Okay.
I've went and looked.
So they're competing against you, but you're not buying from them.
No, I'm not buying from them. And every now MLS, there's not a lot on there. So most of it is just a kind of a referral. And Tommy, honestly, I went in a neighborhood and people, the neighbors might see what I'm doing over here, and they'll say, oh, Karen down the street wants to sell her house, maybe, and I've went down and bought. I've even put signs in the yard where I'll buy a house, and people call me and just referral, and just out there networking it. That's pretty much how I get them, most of them.
Yeah, and you cut out the middleman.
Yes.
It's a shame when we see deals come in all the time, and they've been brought to us from someone who's doing business with a wholesaler. And the wholesaler, they bought it right, but with the purchase price they're offering to our client, it isn't going to work. And if it is going to work, they're going to have to put a bunch of cash in, and it's just at the end of the rainbow, they're not going to make a lot of money.
That's exactly what I'm saying. The numbers just don't work.
Yeah.
for rehabbers like myself, anyway.
Yeah.
Unless there is a buyer for those wholesalers, and they're probably more of just a buy and hold, maybe the lipstick on the pig, and just hang on to it. Then okay. Yep. But for what I do, which I'd like to do a little more in depth repair
Mm-hmm.
on it.
So there's deals out there. You just have to look for them a little more closely.
Yeah, you got to be patient, and wait for them and look for them and know what you want, and you can find them. But you just be patient and not do maybe 10, 20 deals this year. Maybe cut back to 8 or cut it in half and slow down, and I've kind of learned over the years in the slowing down process, you can fine tune that remodel, that rehab, and get better deals at the wholesale, the warehouse, the Home Depot, the Lowe's, and you can make money by just talking to them and getting better deals on merchandise, and you can shop more, and you can I don't want to say micromanage your contractors, but you can get a little better product because you slowed down, and you can watch your contractor, where they bought a little bit of extra material that you probably didn't know about, maybe got thrown in the trash, maybe went somewhere. Now you can get that back and go, and you can make money that way.
Yeah,
just by slowing down a little bit.
Yeah. That's a great point. You can fine tune your machine.
Yes.
And those that can make it through a slowdown,
yes,
they're going to be there and strong when things heat back up.
Yes.
What does it take for things to heat back up?
Man, the pricing's got to come down a little bit. I think the housing pricing. I think once that, because they're way up there. I don't know how long that's going to last, but I think once the pricing falls in line, I think it'll help.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the interest rates are, they're up and down. So, ever since I've been in this real estate business for 20-something years, it's always been up and down. It's flexible, and you got to be able to flex.
Yep.
If you can't flex, you can't make it.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Well, Jimmy, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate all of the insight that you've had between property management, buying deals, helping other people get into the real estate game themselves, flipping houses. I mean, it's a wealth of experience, and I hope that all of our listeners can extract from your message and everything that you've learned, and the downfall of the loose underwriting situation of the past, mm-hmm, and how we can avoid things like that going into the future. Just appreciate you sharing all of that with us. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you guys too. I've been hanging around you guys. I've been with Bernie for a long time. I really appreciate this guy. He's been good to me. Tommy, since you've come on board, man, you guys have always been good to me. So
well, you've always
I just
been
want to say
thank.
I say thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jimmy, it was a pleasure. Hey, Rebels. We'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to rate and review the Launchpad. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. We'd love to talk with you about how we can help, whether that's financing your next deal or partnering with us as a passive investor. If you have any questions or would like to learn more, leave us a comment and one of our team will reach out to you.